Kevin, you may begin when you're ready.
We all set, man? Is everybody on?
No,
Yes.
it's still growing. The number is
Growing.
getting bigger every second.
All right. So
How many
we'll
do you
wait,
expect?
we'll wait another 30 seconds.
Yeah, now it's slowing down a little bit. 133.
It should be over 200.
Oh, no. Okay, so we'll keep going.
All right. Matt, tell me when.
I think it's okay to start now, Kevin. People are going to be keep joining as we go.
Great. All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another LIA special event. We have a terrific program for you here today with our great friend, our great New York State Senator, and now U.S. Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer. Just a couple of preliminaries before we get going with our special guest. I want to thank all the LIA board members on the call today and our chairman, Larry Waldman. I want to acknowledge some special guests also with us today. Pat Foy from the MTA, our town supervisors, Angie Carpenter and Don Clavin, Legislator Kara Hahn, Wayne Wink, and Assemblyman Chuck Levine. If I missed anybody, I apologize, but thank you all for joining us. I also want to, Chuck, thank you for your great staff. Garrett Armwood is just terrific. We all love him out here. He's done a great job. And I haven't met Mikey and Ellie yet, but Matt Cohen already tells me he's doing a great job for you. So you've always had a great team on Long Island, and we thank you for that. And we're going to get right to it. I'm going to introduce our special guest, who's no stranger to Long Island. He has fought for Long Island for decades. And we all know last year was a horrible year with COVID, but there was really one bit of great news for Long Island last year. And that was when the Department of Energy announced that Brookhaven National Laboratory would be the home for the Electron Ion Collider, the ERIC. And that would not have happened without Chuck Schumer's help and leading the way to fight for that. So we thank you, Chuck, on behalf of all Long Islanders. And also congratulations, Chuck, on being the first New Yorker ever to be the U.S. Senate Majority Leader. We're so happy to have you here this afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. It's great to be back at LIA. And this is actually 3 firsts for me with the LIA. This is our first Zoom. I've been at many of your breakfasts and lunches and functions, and I've enjoyed them all, but this is the first one on Zoom. Second, it's the first time I'm addressing you as Majority Leader. I am, as Kevin mentioned, the first New Yorker ever to be Majority Leader, and I want to assure everybody that I will pay as much attention to New York and Long Island as I ever have, and I'll have a little more clout to be helpful, as you'll see in a few minutes with the first bill we did. But I only can do my job if I keep my feet on the ground. My feet on the ground is New York. And whenever I come home and meet with people and talk to people, that's how I learn. That's how I get to be a better senator all the time. So I'm not deserting anything. So the first on Zoom, the first as Majority Leader, but the first where I'm going to say goodbye to Kevin Law. And let me tell you what a great job he has done at the LIA for over 10 years. He's advocated for Long Island as a whole. He's advocated for its businesses, large and small. He mentioned one of our great accomplishments. This is groundbreaking in a world-class world way, bringing the Electron Ion Collider. And he was a great collaborator there. He was a great collaborator in getting the funding for East Side Access. And he helped build out the innovation corridor on Long Island, from the Feinstein Institute at Northwell to Cold Spring to Stony Brook to all the rest that was part of that. So Kevin leaves the LIA, but his fingerprints are all over Long Island. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And let's have a virtual round of applause. I'm sure there have been many, and there'll be many more to come for Kevin Law. Thank you, Kevin, for all that you have done for Long Island. We so respect what you have done, and we are glad you're still staying in touch with all of us.
Thank you.
I also want to thank everybody on the Zoom here. You're all busy. You have your businesses, you have your families, the ups and downs in life that God visits on every one of us. But you take time to care about Long Island and care about your community. And that's a great thing. And that's been an American tradition for generations and generations. So thank you all and appreciate it. Now, everyone knows this has been a really hard year for all of us. We're trying to turn the corner, and I think we are, and making things better, but it's a hard year. So I'm going to start off by telling you a little bit about June 6th for me, which was a day I would call, using Charles Dickens' opening line in A Tale of Two Cities. I think it was the opening line. And he said, "This was the best of times, this was the worst of times." It was the best of times because the election in Georgia occurred on the 5th, the day before. I was on tenterhooks because obviously if we won those 2 seats, I'd become majority leader. If it was an uphill fight, but that was the only way left to become it. And I watched the TV Tuesday night. Tuesday night bled into Wednesday morning. We still didn't know the results. I was on the computer clicking in every 10 seconds. What's the new numbers in Chatham County? What's the turnout of the African-American vote in DeKalb County? Stuff like that. Finally, at 4 in the morning, it became clear that both Ossoff and Warnock would win and I would become majority leader. Well, my first reaction is an obvious one: joy. I had worked so long and so hard to get there, and here it was. Your heart just pounds with excitement and strength and pleasure. And you know what the feeling is like. Every one of you has set some major goals for yourselves in life, whether they be personal or family or professional. And when you achieve them, it's a great feeling. But the second emotion I had shortly thereafter was one that was a little more surprising. I would call that one of awe. And what do I mean by awe? I don't mean it in the sense that my teenage kids used to use it. "Gee, Dad, that movie was awesome," or "Your coat is awesome." But rather, awe in the biblical sense. When the angels saw the face of God, they trembled in awe. And I realized immediately the responsibilities that had been placed on my shoulders and the shoulders of our Democratic majority. All the problems with COVID, of course, the economic problems, the healthcare problems, and all the other problems that came about. But in addition, the other problems that preceded COVID. I mean, this is something, and some of you will not agree with this, but I'm telling you how I felt. I always asked myself how the American people could elect a guy like Donald Trump. And I'm not talking his politics, left, right, or center, Republican or Democrat, but rather he was a very selfish, dishonest in terms of just he'd tell a lie like that, divisive, and oftentimes bigoted man. And the answer was very simple. Not very simple, but at least the one I came to: when Americans don't have hope in the future, when they don't think that the American dream is real, and the American dream, what does that mean? It means, it's very simply put, the average American saying, means if I work hard, I'll be doing 10 years from now than I'm doing today, and my kids will be doing still better than me. When you don't have that hope, you turn to false gods, far right or far left, and they're gods of blame, etc. And I'll sum it up this way, just this way, because it shares my thinking on where we're going. I have interns every summer. They're very diverse, geographically, economically, racially, etc. And I have lunch with them each summer. And since 1999, when I became senator, I'd always ask them this question: do you think you'll be doing better economically than your parents? From 1999 to 2012, every single one said yes. Every single one. And I always said, hey, that's the optimism of youth. The wealthy kids said yes, the poor kids said yes, and everybody in between. Starting in 2013, not everyone said yes, and it got worse and worse and worse till this year, only 3 of 20 raised their hands. And I went, and one young lady came over to me at the end, and she said, look, my parents, when they were my age, just about my age, they could afford a house. I'm not sure I can. My parents got out of college debt-free. I have $100,000 in debt. And my parents, when they were ready to start their lives, they sort of knew their direction, where they were going. The world is changing so fast that I'm not sure where I'm going to be a few years from now. Her feeling, and the feeling of millions and millions like her in different situations, is what we have to deal with. Because if we don't, people will turn to demagogic people who would be no good for our democracy. So I felt this obligation, a moral obligation, an economic obligation, a political obligation, to move the country forward and give America hope again. So those two things were coursing through my veins, the joy of achieving, but the seriousness of the responsibility. And I got in the car, I couldn't sleep, got in the car at 7:30, drove down to Washington. I'm on the floor of the Senate, got on there at 1. I'm only there 45 minutes when a police officer in a big bulletproof vest with a submachine gun strapped across his waist grabs me firmly by the collar like this. I'll never forget that feel. And he says, "Senator, we're in danger. We got to get out of here." We go out the door, walking briskly, make a right turn out the Senate chamber door. And if you saw it, because they showed the film of this at the impeachment trial and a lot of times on TV, we're walking out the door briskly. They don't see us. We're on the other side of the door. And 10 seconds later, we're running the other way. I was within about 20 feet of these horrible, selfish, nasty, bigoted, white supremacist insurrectionists. And had one of them had a gun, or had they run around and surrounded us, I don't know if I'd be talking here today. So it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And my mission, just to repeat, those people are awful. But there are a lot of people who share at least some of the anxiety that they share, that they had. They turned it to an awful purpose. We need to give people hope so those people don't grow in number, okay? That's my view. 2020, a horrible year, worst economic crisis since the Depression 75 years ago, the worst healthcare crisis in 100 years, all the racial divisions in America torn open by the deaths of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. There's a trial now for his murder. And so it was a tough year, but it ended. God works in mysterious ways. It ended in 3 good ways. One of them, which some of you will disagree with, Trump's no longer president. He didn't want to be in New York. He's in Florida. Good. Second, we got the vaccine. The amazing advances of medical science, of our scientists, of our researchers, of our pharmaceutical industry. We got this vaccine amazingly quickly, amazingly effectively. And in the COVID bill we passed in December and the one we just passed, it's going to be made available to everybody much more quickly than people think. Joe Biden outlined this. He said by May 1st, anyone who wants a vaccine will be available. The federal government is going to set up sites all over the state where the federal government will either supplement the local or state governments, but more likely in many places take charge. So everyone will know the number of vaccines coming. There'll be fewer restrictions. You'll just go online and get it. And, originally people felt, well, it won't be till the fall that we'll come back. Biden said July 4th, maybe, God willing, it'll be even sooner. So that's the second good thing. And by the way, the vaccine is free. We've made sure that everyone gets it for free. We don't want anything financial to stand in the way of people getting it. And I hope everyone will and encourage others. My parents are 97 and 92. And when it was, when they made it so that people over 85 could get it, they got it. They've had no side effects, no symptoms. The third good thing that happened is we passed 2 pieces of legislation, which is what I'm going to dwell on for the rest of my talk, that is really very, very helpful to New York and to Long Island. What I can say to everybody when we passed this bill, and believe me, when you needed 50 votes and we couldn't get any Republican votes, interestingly, more than half the Republicans in America support the bill, the voters, but no Republican senator did, unfortunately. So I had to get 50, and I have a caucus that runs from Bernie Sanders to Joe Manchin. Not easy, but we did. And so I can tell Long Island very simply, help is on the way. Help is on the way in a variety of ways, which I'll get to, but succinctly put, help is on the way. People will get their checks. For people whose income is low income or moderate income, and that's going to give a big kick to the economy. They'll get those by March 1st. Help is on the way in terms of the vaccines, which I mentioned. Help is on the way with money for our schools. There'll be enough money for the schools to open quickly and safely, so all of them will be open 5 days a week by September, and most of them will be open sooner. So help is on the way in a variety of ways, but those are 3 quick, tangible ways. Now, let me go into, and with the money in the plan, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development projected that the American Rescue Plan could double our economic growth this year. One great mistake we made in 2009 with the last crisis, the fiscal crisis, was we didn't get enough money. We didn't put enough money into the economy, and it lagged for a long time. We didn't make that mistake this time. And even conservative folks like Jerome Powell, the head of the Fed, said, err on the side of too much rather than too little, because you need to get that economy going. In these bills, I assure you, New York does extremely well, extremely well. And I make sure of that. I got some clout. I use my formula always to benefit New York. And we've probably gotten close to New York, and New York institutions got about $200 billion over the last few bills. And we've helped our small businesses, our hospitals. Many of them would have gone under last year if we didn't get money there. We've helped so many different institutions. I'm going to go through some of that. So the first thing I want to mention in some degree is state and local money, because as you know, we didn't get any. We did get, I negotiated the first CARES bill just with Mnuchin. He and I were sitting in my office. I'm right here in my office because I'm going to the signing ceremony in a little while over at the White House. But we negotiated the bill, and at the last minute, I got 150 billion in state funding, but not that much for localities, although both Nassau and Suffolk County got significant money. In the second bill in December, McConnell wouldn't let any money go through for state and local. And our state and local governments are hurting. So I made it my business to make sure it was robust this time. And what we did is we got $350 billion. About 60% goes to the state. The state will have all the money it needs. Its deficit this year is projected at $5 billion. We get the state directly a total of $35 billion in terms of direct aid, which is 12.6, education aid, transportation aid, et cetera, okay? But I said that 40% of the money had to go directly to the localities. When the state gets the money, the localities don't get them. And our local governments were hurting too. And if they have to cut back on services, if they have to cut back on employment, it hurts our economy. And so the total amounts of money, to break it down, 12.6 for the state, 6 billion for New York's metro cities, 4 billion for New York's counties, 825 million for small cities, towns, and villages, and then 353 million, a separate amount of money to the state for broadband, to lay broadband. So let me give you some numbers for Long Island. Nassau County will get this is over the next 2 years, and they can use it beyond that because a lot of the COVID overhang is going to stay and hurt unless we pump some money in. There's $397 million for Nassau County. Laura Curran's very happy. 286 million for Suffolk County. Steve Ballone is happy. But our towns and our villages get money as well. So I'm giving you some numbers here. 84 million for the town of Hempstead, 32 million for the town of Oyster Bay, 25 million for the town of North Hempstead, 55 million for the town of Brookhaven, 50 million for the town of Islip, 27 million for the town of Babylon, 22 million for Huntington, 12 million for Smithtown, 6 million for Southampton, 3.5 for Riverhead, 2.4 for Southold, 2.4 for East Hampton, and Shelter Island even gets $270,000, which for them ain't bad. The money can be used rather flexibly. It can be used to, of course, to address lost revenues and budget causes by the pandemic. But one of the greatest asks of local government, Steve Ballone has always been asking out in Suffolk, is water and sewer. Particularly in COVID, all of our water and sewer projects were slowed down. So it can be used for water, sewer, and broadband. It can also be used for assistance to homes, small businesses, and nonprofits that are hurting. So in addition to the federal programs, you can get your county executive or your town supervisor to craft a program to help some of our businesses there. So it's very flexible. And my office now, as Kevin mentioned, Garrett Armwood has done a great job for me on Long Island. You all know him. He's being promoted and moving to our New York City office. But Mike Iannelli, who many of you knew because he was my body guy, he's from Wantagh. He's a native Long Islander. Mike Iannelli will now run the Long Island office. And you'll love him. He's great. Okay. We got other things in this bill. Our restaurants throughout Long Island are hurting. Our restaurants, these are the businesses that are hurt the most. The businesses where people gather are the businesses that are hurt. It is estimated that 1/3 of our business, our restaurants, would go broke in the next 3-4 months if we didn't help them. They would just had been through. So we got $28 billion for restaurants. They get a 6-month grant, not a loan, and they can use it very flexibly. And we hope, God willing, by September, this will all be over and they won't need a grant. We also got, between the two bills, about $17 billion for our Save Our Stages, which is for our arts venues, our theaters, our places where people gather, etc. And that is saving them. Again, any place where people gathered needed extra help in addition to the PPP program. We did get $15 billion for idle grants. And this is very important for people. We got more money for the employee retention tax credit. A business of any size, you can be over 300 or 500 employees, which, as you know, the PPP program was limited to. But this is up to $40,000 in salary. If you can show your revenues are such, you'd have to lay off someone. You will get 70% of up to $40,000 in salary for employees you retain as a credit. That's a tax credit. So that's a really good deal. And not enough people know about it. You ought to, LIA, spread the word, please, because it's really helpful to our businesses. We extend the PPP program. We make it larger and more flexible than it's been in the past. So businesses, you can get a second round now of PPP. Right now it expires as of March 31st, which is a couple of weeks away, but we're going to extend it. And many of these programs are bipartisan. Whenever I can work with our Republican colleagues on proposals, even if they don't support the overall bill, fine. The restaurants bill was the first bill I get the power as majority leader to put anything on the floor I want. And that gives me the power to determine what goes on the floor of the Senate. The first bill I put on was the Bipartisan Restaurants Act, which I mentioned, sponsored by Kirsten Sinema, a Democrat of Arizona, and Roger Wicker, a Republican of Mississippi. We also included $3 billion in economic development aid for tourism, and that money goes to communities that have lost jobs and revenue because of the decline of tourism and travel. And I made sure that the use of, the state and local money can bolster our tourism industry. So if the town of East Hampton, which might have been hurting, they weren't, I guess, because a lot of people went out there, but any town that has tourism and all of that and is hurting, you can use some of that state and local money for that, as well as the other. I mentioned the Restaurants Act. I just went to the owners just to announce this restaurant. You probably saw this in Newsday. I went to Cafe Il Villaggio in Babylon, and 54% of our restaurants desperately said they needed this money. As I mentioned, there's the direct checks. I mentioned the stuff about COVID, mass transit. In the first two bills, mass transit's one of our pet things. In the first two bills, we got $4 billion each, so we got $8 billion. Now we get another $6.5 billion for the MTA. And that means that the Long Island Railroad should not have to reduce service. They were reducing. I told them, I'm getting you this money. There are 14.5 billion reasons you shouldn't cut back on service, and now they're not. We also got money for hurting, fewer people riding, and some money for bus service, which I know Nassau County particularly was interested in. We doubled this economy, doubled the child tax credit and the earned income tax credit. Half the children in poverty will be lifted out of poverty. If you're a child born into poverty, no fault of your own, you don't have adequate food, you don't have adequate health care, you don't have adequate education, you probably don't have adequate shelter, housing. And then by the time you're 18, you're way behind the 8 ball. This should eliminate, if we can eliminate half of child poverty by permanently extending this is just for the life of COVID, it'll be really, really significant for the future of America. For education, We got $9 billion for our K through 12 schools. Every Long Island school will have enough money, and it's a direct school. If those of you on school boards or affiliated with schools, it doesn't go through the state where they can mess around with it. It goes directly to the school boards. So you will get the money yourself. I think that's very important. There's paid sick leave credit. If an employer wants to give paid sick leave during COVID because of all the federal government will reimburse them 100%. There is student loan relief tax exclusion. You know, I'm trying to get the president to forgive a good chunk of the student loans that so burden our young people. But this is just says if you get forgiveness from anybody, you don't pay any taxes on it. Let's see. How rental assistance and emergency mortgage assistance. People who've lost their jobs and might lose their homes can get some help. And we got $7 billion to help through the FTC to help schools and libraries make sure that our school kids get broadband. Broadband's a necessity. It's a necessity. And so Franklin Roosevelt said in the 30s, every home should have electricity, a necessity. High-speed internet's a necessity in the 21st century. If you don't have it, you're way behind. This helps poorer families and more isolated families who need the last mile get broadband. And finally, those of you, some of you may be in the funeral business. We got money. One of the things that broke my heart, I'm sure it did yours too. You see children and grandchildren with their face up against the glass because they can't say goodbye to their parents or grandparents who are dying of COVID. And a lot of these families had no money anymore, so they couldn't even pay for a funeral or burial. We got some help for that, and I will send information to the funeral directors. This is going to help people pay if they can't afford a funeral and have no income because they lost their money in COVID. We did this for Sandy, by the way, so it's not something new, but we extended it here. So there's a lot in these bills. I think by the summer, God willing, we will have enough people vaccinated that we can go back to life from normal and our economy the right thing by pumping enough money into the economy that it really takes off. And so I am very hopeful that will happen. And one final thing, I know you'll ask me a question on this, but I won't save it. One of my things that not done in this bill because the reconciliation rules wouldn't let it, we didn't, to undo the SALT cap. It is of high priority for me. When we do a tax bill, I will do everything I can to put that in. And that may be in the next bill, the big infrastructure bill will probably have some tax stuff in it. So that'll be our first opportunity to do it. And I will push hard as I can to get that done. This bill, we got the state and local money for New York. Next bill, let's get rid of the SALT cap, which has been a burden. And this idea that it just helps rich people. Ask a typical family on Long Island where maybe one of them's a firefighter and one of them's a nurse. They're getting killed by the SALT cap, the removal of the SALT deduction. We want to restore it fully. With that, thank you. I have faith in New York. I've been around for each crisis. 9/11, financial, Sandy, now. Each time they said, forget New York, they're going to never come back. Each time New York does come back, in part because I've been able each crisis to get New York the money it needs, but far more importantly, because New Yorkers have strength and gumption and optimism, and we love New York, and we always come back, and we will again. Okay, Kevin, ready to roll.
Well, great stuff, Chuck, and thanks for giving us that hope. Chuck, I want to give you 3 examples this week. I've had numerous calls and meetings, but I've spoken with Hempstead Town Supervisor Don Clavin, Suffolk County Executive Steve Ballone, and Pat Foy from the MTA. All three of them this week said, thank God for Chuck Schumer, because you helped them all out, and you helped out Long Island in all the ways you just mentioned. So, thanks for sharing all that information. I have a couple of questions for you. Some came from our members and board members, and we'll get right to it because I know you have to go to the White House. You talked a little bit about January 6th. You'll recall about 8 years ago, I had former Vice President Dick Cheney at the LIA event, and you were at that luncheon.
Yes,
and he spoke about being in the White House on 9/11, hearing about the planes, and then also being whisked away like you were.
Yes.
When you were whisked away on January 6th, were you aware that the protesters were in there with Confederate flags and anti-Semitic flags and shirts and hats? And what was going through your mind when all this was happening?
You know, I was just, it was such a whirl, you know, to be pulled out of the chamber like that suddenly. But then I became aware of it, and you saw, and I got to give a lot of credit to the Capitol Hill Police, National Guard. I just this morning met with some New York National Guards men and women who are here protecting us and making sure this doesn't happen again. And it was shocking. And one of them, I was later told, was asking for, where's the big Jew? That meant me, because I am not only the first New Yorker to be majority leader, I'm the first Jewish person ever to be majority leader. And I guess these right-wing white supremacist groups knew this. I still can't believe it happened. It's one of the darkest days in American history. And make no mistake about it, Kevin, if not for Donald Trump, it wouldn't have happened. He encouraged it, he incited it. In the words of Mitch McConnell, he was to blame for it. So we cannot let this happen ever again. We are looking first, our law enforcement is going after everyone who is in the building, and they will get the full extent of the law hurled at them. And I hope they get long jail sentences, not just because they deserve it for what they did to defile our democracy, but also to be a warning to others not to repeat it. But second, they're really looking at some of these white supremacist groups, which frankly, for 4 years, no one paid much attention to them, and they grew like a cancer. And now they're going after them. They've arrested a whole bunch of the leaders of some of these groups. And I'm going to make sure that that continues.
Great. Glad to hear that. Thanks for sharing that, Chuck. One of the questions that came in from one of our members was, and speaking of President Trump, that he put tariffs on Canada. And that has caused the price of wood to skyrocket, which means construction costs are increasing in our state, in our region. Is that something you think you can influence President Biden to repeal those tariffs to make the cost of wood go back down to where it was pre-COVID?
Yes. Look, Trump was just crazy with tariffs. Tariffs can sometimes be useful, maybe against China, although I think even against China, and I've been a scourge against China long. I criticized Obama, Bush, and Trump. Trump did better on China than others in his philosophy, understanding China was a danger, but he couldn't implement anything. And he put tariffs willy-nilly all over the place. I'll tell you, on our northern border, whether it's in Plattsburgh, Buffalo, or anywhere in between, the lack of commerce with Canada has hurt us. These tariffs have hurt us. We're going to have a new trade representative confirmed next week. And once she's in place, I'm going to talk to her about undoing these tariffs. Trump put tariffs everywhere. And in some cases, they were justified. In many cases, they were counterproductive. And I know how much it's hurt our construction industry.
Great, thanks. You mentioned the SALT deductions. Are you optimistic? Do you think you'll at least have the Democrats on board for the elimination of the cap on state and local tax deductions? Or do you think you'll be able to get some bipartisan support for that?
Well, I hope we can get some bipartisan support. You know, they say it's aimed at blue states, but that's not true. It's aimed at any states that have higher expenditures. And we didn't get any in the past, but we could use them. So here's what I would say to all of you. Many of you have business connections, friends, family in other states. Please tell them to write, email, whatever, however they communicate with their senators and say, get rid of this SALT cap. It doesn't just hurt New York, it hurts lots of states. Most of them are blue states. It's true, because the blue states tend to spend a little more money on different social services and on transportation and all things like that. But it's outrageous. We've always said, let each state decide how much it wants to spend, and you didn't penalize it until here. So we're going to try to get this done whether we get Republicans or not. We were able to put it in the House HEROES Act that passed a year ago, a 2-year delay, and I'm working on it now. I'm working, Congressman Swazi, I introduced the bill to repeal the SALT cap, and Swazi has the same bill in the House.
Great, great. Well, good luck with that. Chuck, you also mentioned infrastructure. You know, President Obama tried to do an infrastructure, or talked about it. President Trump talked about infrastructure, but it never got done. Are you optimistic that there will be a big infrastructure bill? And do you see part of that bill being like the rescue plan, where monies could be, certainly designated for regions like Long Island, and perhaps get us more monies for sewers and stuff so we could help revitalize our downtowns?
Yes, I think we'll have a big infrastructure bill, because the goal here is not simply to get out of the ditch of COVID, but to get the economy growing and wages growing like they were in the 70s, 80s, and 90s at a 3 or 4% level, not a 1 or 2% level. The best way to prime the pump to do that is infrastructure. Infrastructure in the past has had bipartisan support. I'm hopeful it will again. And if it's a large bill, there'll be enough to do all kinds of things. But water and sewer is at the top of everybody's list. And even if it's not that large, there'll be very generous water and sewer. But other things that we need to do. For instance, I want to get Gateway done. Gateway is really important. By the way, it'll benefit Long Island's economy because a ton of construction workers will get a lot of overtime who work and live on Long Island. Trump held it up. I got the money in there. Listen to this. So I worked, this was bipartisan also, with a guy named Dan Micah. I forgot his first name, Micah. And his brother was Dan. And what we said was that the Northeast Corridor of Amtrak, which made $500 million, but in the past, they took that $500 million in profit and subsidized, the Boise to Cheyenne Amtrak line, which 5 people rode a week or a day. So what we did is we said, no, that money, all the profits on the Northeast line, which goes from Boston to Washington and right through New York, all the profits should go into capital construction. There's enough money for $30 billion of bonding, just figure it out, any of you in finance, $500 million a year. And so we did that, and there's money for Gateway, but Donald Trump held it up just to be vindictive. He said, well, maybe if I get my wall built, then I'll let you build Gateway. Now we will get it done. And the good news here is not only is Buttigieg the new transportation commissioner for a secretary for it, but the deputy has been nominated as a woman named Polly Trottenberg. She worked for me for 9 years, and she's dedicated to helping us get Gateway done. After that, she became New York City's transportation commissioner. So we will get Gateway done. We will finish East Side Access. And I know there are some new plans, both energy related and others for Long Island. And if we have a big bill, there'll be money for those things, which create jobs, make our economy more efficient, and get us going on a much higher rate, higher trajectory than we have over the last decade.
Great. And hopefully maybe you could bring Secretary Pete Buttigieg and Polly out to Long Island. Maybe we'll do it at Long Island MacArthur Airport. I've done events with you there, and we'll sell them on some Long Island projects.
Yeah, we got, by the way, in this bill, I left this out. There's money for MacArthur. I don't know how much it is. Does anyone on the call know? I think it's it's tens of millions.
Which is great.
Yeah.
I know Angie Carpenter's on the phone, and she says thanks to you as well, Chuck. So speaking of other things in the bill, there was a concern that the Senate was trying to prevent states from trying to lure businesses from one state to the next. And there were some restrictions on there regarding if you receive some of the monies from this rescue plan, that you will no longer be able to give tax breaks for economic developments. Some of the IDAs are concerned about that bill. Was there any intent in the legislation to prevent IDAs from doing the good work that they do?
First of all, this provision that says you can't cut taxes using the money you got is only for the states, not for the localities. So all of our IDAs are unaffected. But second, even for the state, it's net taxes. So if the state wanted to give a tax break, as long as its net taxes didn't go down, they could do it.
Got it. How about you ran off a long list of monies for education. How about for our community colleges and our four-year universities?
$24 billion for higher ed. Originally, they were only going to do it for public universities. I made sure it's private. So the Stony Brooks and Hofstras will benefit, just like the Farmingdales and the Westburys.
Great. Well, good to hear. Good to hear. How about energy and climate change? Do you have some priorities there when it comes to the new infrastructure bill that you'll be working on soon?
Yes. Well, first, we feel very good about extending the tax breaks, for wind and solar. We also want to have a lot of research and money into energy storage, where Stony Brook is a leader and Brookhaven is a leader. A lot of the research they do is helping with storage. And we want to make sure as well that offshore gets the same advantage as onshore, because that's going to be a very big wind area for us. The entire bill, the next proposal that Biden has, which is an infrastructure bill, does traditional infrastructure, water, sewer, mass transit, roads, bridges, but it also puts in a lot of focus into green energy, making things resilient. As you may remember in the Sandy bill, where I got $60 billion for New York, we made sure things were built back resilient so they could resist the second Sandy or other effects of climate change. That's in there. But there's also money, and this will really help Long Island, for laying new power grids to connect all of this clean energy to the power system. And that's been a big issue out there, particularly with some of the offshore wind and other things that are coming. And so that should be very, very helpful as well. We're taking a close look at tax policies so we can increase private investment in clean energy across the board. And that's going to benefit Long Island as well.
Great to hear, Chuck. One of the things I've been trying to do here at the LIA is to also have the LIA speak out on issues that are not just business issues, but important Long Island issues. And a lot of our communities where we have a lot of people of color, some impacted communities, our Hispanic communities, they were really severely impacted with COVID, more so than other communities on Long Island. Is there anything special in the legislation to help our Hispanic communities and our communities of color?
Yes, very much so, because they were left out. And so, for instance, we make sure when the vaccines are made available, that communities of color are not put at the back of the line, which they had often been. Here's another one. We made, the PPP program, if you're a middle-sized business, you have an accountant, you have a banker, and you get this PPP. But if you're a little business, and 90% of our minority businesses have 10 employees or fewer, you may have a bank account, but you don't have a banker. And you may have you may not have the kind of accountant who knows this kind of stuff if you have one at all. So what we proposed is there are certain things called CDFIs and MDIs, Community Development Financial Institutions, Minority Development Institutions. And we gave them money so they can hire people. And if you're a small business, small, even black or white, but it'll affect businesses of color disproportionately positively. You can call these folks and they will help you get the PPP money, the EIDL money, and the other things that the government has provided. That's very important. And we also made sure that some of the money that goes to small business is set aside for smaller businesses so they don't have to compete with the big boys. And we finally eliminated the chains. In the first PPP, some of the big chains, since they had, Red Lobster or Olive Garden didn't have more than 500 employees at one location, but they had a whole lot and they scooped in and got the money. They can't anymore. If you have more than 20 branches, you can't, I don't know what you call them, but separate facilities, you can't get that money.
Got it. I know you have to head over to the White House in a few minutes. One more question came from our audience. In the 1970s, President Carter created a commission on hunger, and he asked Harry Chapin to help lead that effort. And similarly today, everybody thinks of Long Island as a very wealthy place, but we know there are a lot of Long Islanders hurting and going hungry, and people who have never used those types of soup kitchens or food pantries in the past, like Long Island Cares. Would you support President Biden creating a new commission on hunger like Jimmy Carter did in the 70s?
That's a very interesting idea. In this bill, we increase SNAP and we give money for food pantries like Long Island's food pantries, and we'll get some help, because you're right. People are lining up there who never thought they'd need food, but they lose their jobs. What are they going to do? They got to feed their families.
Right.
And so we have put extra dollars in for that. But having a commission on hunger is something I'd very carefully look at. Yes, no child should be hungry in America, period. If you're hungry, you can't learn, your health care gets worse, everything. So that's a bottom line, I would think.
Great, thank you. Listen, I apologize for those. We couldn't get to every question here today. Chuck, I want to give you the last word. Anything else you want to say about our nation, our state, our island? And I want to hand it over to you before you have to run over to the White House.
Well, I have faith in America and faith in New York. We always bounce back. After 9/11, they said New York will never come back. After Sandy, they said the whole South Shore would be deserted and everyone would move. We always bounce back as a country, as a community, Long Island, and as a state, and we will. The one thing I will tell your listeners, if there are certain things you need help with federally, I have a very active Long Island office. As I said, Garrett Armwood's moving to our New York City office, but Mike Iannelli, graduate of Wantaw High School, and a great guy and a real Long Islander, is going to take over, and we will help you. So don't be shy about calling us. As I said when I started, I'm proud to be majority leader, but I also will never forget where I come from and the people who elect me, and I'll always be there for you.
Well, Chuck, we thank you for that. And I know you'll never stop coming to the Stony Brook University graduations and all the other college graduations and high school graduations, because that's what people love about you. Stay in touch and be here on Long Island. And we thank you for that. Good luck as you now lead the U.S. Senate. And we look forward to seeing you in person soon. And congratulations on getting the rescue plan signed by President Biden on your way over to the White House today. Thank you very much.
Stay healthy, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you all. Have a good weekend.